We need to get all of these opened up resin blisters from looking like this to looking like this. And this is how we did it. Hello, we are Patrick and Rebecca Childress in our 6-month-old South African deckhand Kawadi on our Valiant 40 brick house. And we are hauled out in Richards Bay, South Africa. In 1976, when this boat was built, the price of oil in the US just about tripled. And along with that, all oil-related products like fiberglass resin. And the builder of this boat decided to change resin suppliers and go to a cheaper resin. No one could have foreseen the consequences. Over the years and decades, the uncured resin in the layup has been trying to get out of that layup and causing blisters on its way out. So these are uncured resin blisters. It has nothing to do with osmotic blisters, which is water trying to get into the laminate and then causing blisters. So I've seen these blisters develop and get bigger and more numerous over the past 12 years of crossing oceans on this boat. So right here in Richards Bay, after sailing 3/4 of the way around the world, I've decided to dig in, take care of these blisters, make sure that there's no structural issues, and fix these up just as best as I could so we can carry on and cross more oceans and have no more problems. And hopefully any future owner of this boat, 20 years from now, if there's problems, they'll be just minimal. So we'll see what happens in 20 years. I hope I'm around to see it. But this is what we did to dig in and fix our resin blisters for right now. Digging into these resin blisters below the waterline where there's a lot of soft anti-fouling paint just wasn't working out so well. We opened them up a bit, but there had to be a better way of digging out the fiberglass that was delaminated from the hull. And that's where we found it was better to first drill holes into these blisters, and if there is moisture, which oftentimes there was, to let it squirt out. Although it might look clear here, generally the liquid was more of a dark tobacco looking color. Eventually we got all the bottom paint off, which was a whole video in itself, and that took weeks to do. But that also made it easier to find the less obvious blisters, like this one that has a little bit of a ring around the perimeter. So this is where our nice flat random orbit sander just went over the top and outlined this ring. All right, it's time to dig in and take care of this blister. We found a much better, faster way to open up these blisters. So that we didn't have to spend a lot of time and send a lot of dust into the air with the disc sanding, we used 2 different size hole saws. And of course, we first got rid of the pilot bit. Got that out of the way. We don't need to be drilling holes right up through the hull of the boat to the inside. And made a pilot guide out of a thick piece of plywood. That held the hole saws in place while we were able to at least get them started. And once the hole was started, then we could get rid of the guide and go ahead and drill the rest of the way through the delaminated fiberglass. Certainly made it a lot faster and easier than just a lot of disc sanding. So what starts out as a shallow blister can wander off in any direction and then become a deep pit going through many layers of fiberglass. Those vertical parallel stripes are where this boat was peeled below the waterline only in 2001 and treated for blisters at that time. It is quite obvious that just surface peeling to a particular depth is not the best way to go, because these blisters originate at all different depths within the laminate layup. It was becoming frustrating. Just when I thought we had all the blisters opened up, I would find another one. But my eye was getting a little better at finding these things. And especially in the late day light, the side lighting would show up blisters that just weren't obvious during the midday light. So this one, it's a small one. I probably should have seen it before because of that circular identification. So we dig in and open that one up too.
These are the discs that we were using on the 7-inch quarter cable disc sander, 36 grit and 24 grit. Occasionally we would drill into a small blister and it would turn out to be fairly solid. So for that small hole, we would use this angle grinder with a metal grinding disc on it to kind of feather out that hole. But it left such a ragged finish, we would have to go back with the larger disc sander and help flatten it out a bit.
Here's an example of a blister that has been ground out fairly symmetrically around. However, there's still a bit of a bubbled area here, so this grinding is going to have to come back much further out to where it's well adhered in the layers.
We want to grind open all those layers of fiberglass, the existing layers of fiberglass, so that when we lay up the new layers of fiberglass, there will be very good adhesion to what is already there. So here's a spot that was ground out to take care of a blister, and after a month of drying, we have one little spot here that's starting to bleed through. So I'll get in here today with a grinder and grind this out. We'll see how far back that little wet spot goes, but I would predict something about that size. So we're getting down to these fine little areas and hopefully closing in on a date to start putting everything back together again. At the end of nearly every day, I'd get out the water hose and wash down all these open blisters. And it's pretty well known that this process of washing them will help draw out more of any liquid that might still be hiding in the laminate. I think if you do some research on moisture meters, you'll find that they aren't terribly reliable. They give a lot of false indications. But what I needed it for on this project was to give an initial reading and then see if that reading changes over the following months, which fortunately it did, and in our favor. After 5 months of drying, the numbers were very much in our favor. I'm 69 years old, we've waited long enough, time is ticking, it's time to put this boat back together and move on. The best information I have on this is up to 10% moisture is acceptable for rebuilding, but if you have better information, then please share it in the comments so others who are watching this video can benefit from your knowledge. Environmental concerns in many of these foreign boat yards is not the concern that it would be in America, New Zealand, Australia, or many other countries. But we would still set up our old mainsail drop cloth as a containment cloth, not only for our dust, but to keep our neighbors' dust off of our boat, especially when they were sanding steel. We had to get a system going for patching up all of these irregular shaped blisters. So first they were numbered, and then we got out a sheet of plastic. Emmanuel held it up while Elvis traced out the outline of each numbered blister. Then that piece of plastic was cut out along the magic marker line and used as a pattern to cut out the fiberglass repair cloth. Concentrically smaller pieces of cloth were used then to help fill that depression. It was all a judgment call of whoever's working on that particular void, that particular patch, on how many layers of cloth to cut to help fill that depression. This cloth is called biaxial because of its particular weave, as opposed to this more traditional type of cloth, sometimes called boat weave. On the back side of this is chopped strand mat. This chopped strand mat is actually sewn with threads onto the biaxial. Together, this is oftentimes called combi, C-O-M-B-I, but it's also known as 1708 because the biaxial cloth weighs 17 ounces per square yard and the chopped strand mat weighs 8 ounces per square yard. Good, strong combination. We will use this for all of our repairs, all the blister repairs, all the laminating and the buildup, and we'll generally put the chopped strand mat side down onto the repair first and build up from there. Yeah, the chopped strand mat has a nice way of folding into a lot of the defects and depressions of our repair work. On the final layer, we'll put peel ply. Peel ply is a cloth. It's a polyester cloth, very finely woven, but you just put it on as though it's another layer of fiberglass cloth, but you don't wet out around the edges. You don't want to glue the edges down. But when everything is all set up, you peel this off. It'll leave a texture equal to the weave of the cloth, so it has tooth for the next layer of cloth to bed to and adhere to. And along with using the peel ply, any amine blush, which is a chemical reaction in epoxy resins, comes off in the peel ply, so there's no more washing or any other prep work that's needed on our laminate, on our layup, after the peel ply comes off. Actually, amine blush is a reaction between the epoxy hardener and the surrounding humidity in the atmosphere. Some hardeners, like what's used in 2-part epoxy putties, don't create amine blush. So we have all of our stacks of pre-cut glass all lined up, ready to go. Now all we need is some fiberglass resin. And this is epoxy Gurit 106 resin using slow hardener, and it's a 1:5 mix. This is very similar to as West System 105. And these pumps are very easy to use for these small mixes. And Talente is our mixer man. It was so easy just to say, Talente, I need 5. And he'd give us 5 pumps, or we need 6, or we need 7. And he would just mix up what we need. And this was his full-time job all day long. Talente is wearing a double respirator only because I was working on a separate project myself, and I had him mixing up thickened epoxy with Cabosil. Cabosil is a very flaky powder you do not want to breathe. If we needed a big batch of resin, then we would use a small kitchen scale to weigh it out. Elvis and Manuel worked well together. Emmanuel was the more experienced apply man, and Elvis supplied him with everything that he needed next. It doesn't matter who you are in South Africa. Even adult boat owners go around this repair yard barefoot. Tough African feet they have. Sippo has been working in this boat yard for at least 15 years. He knows everything about everything, and I've learned a lot from him. He's starting out filling up these small depressions with smaller pieces of fiberglass cloth, and then working into larger diameter sections to eventually fill up the whole depression, and certainly rolling out any air bubbles that might be entrapped in the laminate. 10 years ago, Emmanuel started out here as a security guard. Now he, just like Sippo, is one of the best fiberglass men and all-around boat repair guys available. In the morning, Talente gets to pull all the other peel ply off of our previous day's patching, and that'll give us an idea if we have to lay in more fiberglass cloth, do some sanding, or if we just get to start puttying and fairing everything. Talente started out in this boatyard working on the catamaran that was hauled out in front of us, polishing it. That catamaran was used in our how to clean the bottom video, tips from the pros. But I saw how hard he went every day, non-stop, so I had to snag him. And he's caught on very quickly on how to mix resin, sand resin, apply resin, and do the layups. So he's becoming a very good fiberglass man himself, along with all the other things that a boat repair yard needs to have done. So Talente is an independent contractor. Now that we don't need him anymore, he stays very busy because he's very desired by all the other private boat owners who are hauled out and need some excellent work done. Using the peel ply helped tremendously to smoothen the surface of the laminate, but we still had to go back with the 7-inch disc sander and also the 6-inch random orbit sander to help smoothen things even more to prepare everything for puttying and patching. And that's where a lot of tedious work would begin. This boat needed massive amounts of puttying and fairing from the gunnel all the way down to the bottom of the keel. And it would be very impractical to try to mix up 2-part epoxy resin and mix in the proper fillers and everything else and then get it out of the bucket before it's set up and onto the boat and fair it out. So we chose to use a 2-part ready mix fairing compound, S-Fair 600, which we got from AMT Composites out of Durban, and we would have them send it up on a little truck whenever we needed more. It's good stuff. Everything on this whole project is only epoxy. We never used any polyester or vinyl ester resins for anything. But the S-Fair, you just mix it up 1:1 by volume, or if it's by weight, it's 100 to 64. And the first number is always the resin. So that would be 100 parts, and the 64 would be the hardener quantity. It's very easy to mix this stuff by eye. You make 2 nice globs of equal size and shape, and then mix it all together thoroughly. And then you're ready to go. But still, the working time is very short. You do have to move fast, and this is probably about as much as what we could mix up at one time and get it on the boat before
having it start to set up and become useless to us. Spreading the putty thin and wide on the mixing board like this decreases the amount of heat buildup, so it increases the amount of working time before it starts to set up. Before applying any compound to the boat, we first wash everything thoroughly to get the sanding dust off, using a lot of fresh water and a terry cloth towel to wipe everything down as though we're washing a car. A scrub brush just does not work. It always leaves sanding dust and other contaminants behind. We need a very clean surface for all of this to adhere to properly. But after washing and everything's dry, then we went back and wiped everything down with acetone and very clean paper towels or very clean rags that we had laundered. Trowels or putty knives like this, or sheetrock compound knives like this one, were adequate for some of these smaller areas and flatter areas, but once we got into much larger compound curves or large straight areas, we had to find something that would work much better and that would conform to the compound shapes. So we finally figured that out and we made our own tools. Get into that in the next video in this series, part 2. And we'll also show you how we made long boards for sanding all of this stuff down and getting a nice, long, even finish. It was a lot of work.